Okay, thank you everybody. OSMC welcomes the opportunity to consider this report. I'd encourage members in attendance to contribute and ask the questions relevant to this report and identify any feedback they wish to make. And we're going to have a bit of an overview before going into the predetermined questions. Thank you.
Are we doing introductions?
Sorry, yes, please do introduce yourselves.
I'm Debbie Hogg, and Director of Resources and also the Senior Responsible Officer for this airport and the report in front of you. In terms of giving you an overview about the content of the report, it's effectively a summary of the matters that have occurred over the last 2.5 years. I think if you just go to the background documents, you'll see the number of reports and that have been that have been considered previously. The report covers the procurement process, and that which was undertaken via the Utilities Contract Regulations 2016. We'll talk about those stages in a bit more detail as part of the meeting. The report also talks about the enhanced due diligence that was undertaken as part of that, and the next stages which are required. The report also considers the public subsidy application and the matters arising as a result of that. We, as a consequence of the public subsidy application, King's Council was actually sought, and as a result of that, that's how Fly Doncaster came into creation. There was the report also covers the outline business case, and then also as that progressed, the full business case that came to Cabinet in June 24. The report also covers as I've just talked about, basically the business case that was prepared in terms of Green Book business case standards, and the stages that have taken place subsequently. So I think basically there's an awful lot of material that's been contained, and we'll happily take questions in relation to those matters as we go forward. But I just thought I'd provide a structure in terms of those key building blocks that are contained within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to say anything before we go into the questions at this stage? Thank you. Okay, first question we've got from Councillor Cox. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you covered some of that, Debbie. Can you tell us more about the due diligence process undertaken during procurement for an airport operator, and can you evidence this?
Thank you. So as I've identified, we start to consider first and foremost I guess what were we trying to achieve with in terms of the objectives, and we considered a range of different approaches. And then once we knew what we were trying to achieve, we then had to consider the procurement vehicle, the procurement approach to take. And at that point in time, that's why we were advised by our procurement internal colleagues, that's Holly, about what the best route to market was. And that's why we selected the Utility Contract Regulations 2016. And at that point, I felt, although we'd done quite a lot of market engagement, we needed to formalise that. We just needed to know more about what the market was saying. So previously, there'd been lots of engagement, but so as a result of that, we held a pre-market engagement session in the Hilton, and lots of people engaged with that. And we set various questions as part of that, but it was an informal, that really wasn't part of the procurement process, but it was to help us understand who were in the market and some of the responses they might make as a result of that process. We then started on a formal process, which is 3 stages. So I don't know if anybody's done a competitive dialogue, but you do an assessment about the nature of the fit for purpose of the organisation. That used to be called a PQQ, it's now called an SQQ, and that concluded in November 23. And at that point, coming into that process, we had 35 companies. And then we went on to another stage, which is the ISOP stage, where we had that concluded in January 24, and we had 8 companies. And then we had the next stage, which is the ISFT, which had 3 stages, which was stage 3, and that completed in July 24. And at that point, there was 1 company. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about, to give you an understanding about what was required in each of those stages. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight in terms of the types of questions we asked, and I'm sure that other colleagues will also chip in, because largely the evaluation panel is sat here, and we also supplemented that with advisors that we'd secured, and in some instances there were other people like Business Doncaster that contributed to it as well. So the first stage was largely, we looked at funding. We asked questions about funding and financing. We also asked questions about the management of capital investments, projects of an airport or a similar asset. And we also asked about existing experience of owning or operating international airports. So at that stage, largely what it's doing is it's testing out what experience people have of doing the job. Yeah. And you'll probably guess as I go through this, the different stages, because what you're doing is you're taking the engagement with the market, you're funneling down in order to ensure, it's a bit like an interview process. So anybody who's done interviews, you start off with a whole bunch of applications, you sift them, and then you sift them again, then you interview people. And it's more complicated, trust me. But it's largely the similar sort of process, and it's to ensure that there's natural justice, that you're considering the response that everybody's provided in an equal way and against a mark score, so that then it's recorded, because you asked the question about could it be evidenced. So at each stage Holly is the lead procurement. She doesn't do the evaluation. She's like what I called a ringmaster. She's effectively whipping us into shape. So the information comes in from businesses, and we get the pack of information. We independently review that information, and then we come together as what I call the witches' coven, which basically we all sit together. We share what our scores are. If there's quite significant divergence between those scores, then it is for the person at each extreme of the scoring to justify why they've given that score in order to arrive at a score. And then once those scores are agreed upon, because it needs to be a collective decision, then that score goes into a spreadsheet which calculates based on the original matrix that you set, and you share with the companies for them to for the outcome of that process to be worked through, and then points equal prizes basically. So the higher you get the score, the better you get that determines who's going through the process. So say stage 1, we asked about funding, financing, experience about previous experience, and management of projects. The second stage, we asked about things like the passengers' ambitions, the freight activities that could be achieved, long-term ambitions, vision. We asked for the approach that people would take to the challenge that we had outlined. we shared with them, for example, because we'd already done a condition survey of the site. We provide that detail as part of our bundle of information to the market. So we said, based on this, what would you think? So we asked for about what the capital for mobilisation and the initial cash flow would be required. We asked for the key activities, including that would be needed about reopening the airport, so licensing, recruitment to key positions, draft dates for commencement of unlicensed activity and licensed activity. So again, hopefully what you're getting from that is we know a little bit about these companies. We want to know more about what these companies will do to bring to us as part of that procurement. And then the third stage was structured more into three areas: a legal work stream, a finance and commercial work stream, and a technical work stream. The legal stream, which Scott led on, which if you want, you can Scott can talk to you about that, but it was looking at the lease and the loan. So I've just talked about we got an assessment of the condition of the site. We knew that there was significant capital that was required in order to get it reopened, and we wanted to understand the extent to which we'd set out a proposition about because at that stage we knew there would be a public subsidy. What our advisors as part of the outline business case had indicated is that in order to get the airport open, the public sector would need to make some investment. It was too big because this is a bit like a start-up company, it was too big a undertaking for a business to come along in order to get it up and running. So we knew at that stage, and there was draft loan agreement as part of the information that we provide. There was also a draft under lease. So we have a superior lease with the freehold owner, we shared those documents as part of this, and we wanted to know what the bidders thought about those two legal documents. So more and on that front. And in terms of the finance and commercial element, we asked them to develop a finance business plan. That finance business plan included passengers activity, non-aero activities, other aero activities, operating expenditure, capital investment and future ambitions. It also asked for information about what financial structure that the operator might propose as part of their solution, and the funding plan. We also asked about the lease payment, start-up capital loan. So you can see that element, there was a whole lot of information we asked for them as part of that. And then the third element was around, so largely Faye and myself had crafted that structure, and the spreadsheet that was the business model that was required had been developed by Ernst Young. So there was a template for people to complete, and so that the numbers behind that business plan were all there and available to us. And then the third element was the technical work stream. So that was the set-up plans, so how would they go about setting up, the governance and decision-making, relationship working and partnership working, and environmental and sustainability approaches. So we set a whole raft of qualitative questions so that they could respond, like in free text, about how they would respond to those different elements, and we scored on most aspects 0 to 5, and as I say, points equal prizes. So all these elements had received different weightings, and a bit like I was saying in the previous meeting, it was a subjective judgment about which areas were more important than others. but the formula that was arrived at in order for once we'd evaluated each part, would go into that element, and then that was set before we scored all the returns, so then that produced the outcome of the process. So hopefully that gives you a very much whistle-stop tour of a year in the life of the team, because that's how long those different processes took to do.
Supplementary to that, I mean, what we've read from Munich and different fly, Plymouth or whatever, FP, is, I mean, is Doncaster the operator? If so, does it require, if so, does it have the experience required by CAA to reopen the airspace? Because there is, obviously Ross has said she wants flights going out of there by summer 26. It seems at this point, when you look at what Munich and FP are, their consultants, is what they're saying. So the operator would be Fly Doncaster. So have you vetted yourself in all this process? Because you've just told me how the question obviously was finding an operator. The operator is yourself. And these other people, Munich and FP, are consultants. So we indirectly are paying them for more information for you to operate. We know that CAA needs this information to reopen. It needs people that have the knowledge of how the airspace and everything works, because at the moment it's running unlicensed. So that means you can't bring anything in. And at this point in time, they are saying they are aiming to open for 2026. They're not saying it's going to be flights to Tenerife. So, I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, obviously the question, do you have the experience? I can see that Christian's nodding, obviously knows what's needed by CAA. Are we going to get there? And can you give a guarantee that people are going to be flying to Tenerife in summer 2026?
It's a really good question, Steve. I think there's a number of points you've made there, so I'll take them. The first one is very much around the experience, and as you know, not only has Fly Plymouth and obviously MIA have got their technical expertise, we've also, throughout this project, employed our technical expertise as well. So we have a number of consultants, aviation consultants, who are managing directors for airports, who are supporting us in regards to that reintegration of the airspace. We have a meeting with the Civil Aviation Authority on the 14th of this month, so this Friday, specifically around our airspace. You'll have seen, obviously, the strategic lobbying, 130,000 individuals from Doncaster, from the region, businesses as well, signing that petition, and the power of that was extremely helpful in regards to our airspace change process. Look, we've said very clear from the outset that our airspace is being suspended, it's not being removed. There are a number of airports that are, operating within the UK from an unlicensed activity point of view. If you take, for instance, our airport at the moment, on the 6th of December last year to Excel, they had their first flight returned back since it closed, and currently are operating a number of flights every week in regards to both takeoff as well as landing. So I think in answer to your question, we're extremely confident around the airspace being returned. Part of our argument on this Friday will be around, the most expedient route of the CAA to be able to get that return. It's also dependent on a number of other factors, the financial envelope in regards to the capital infrastructure that's required around supporting that. But also, as you know, there's a real shortage nationally of air traffic controllers. And we also know that we're being inundated with ex-DSA staff, specifically around that particular area, who are very keen. So we are, in terms of very, very keen to get our airspace returned back to 24 hours for next year. and that's the argument we'll be using on Friday. But ultimately, it's a CAA decision.
Thank you. I'll move on to the next question. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Can you please tell us more about the benefit cost ratio of 9:1 and how certain are we that this will be achieved?
Thank you, Councillor Khan. I'll start on this and then Christian will chip in if there's any further points. As detailed in the report, it's the cost ratio has been generated from the, and as Debbie outlined, from the Green Book and the appraisal of the projects that might require public sector investment, and has been undertaken by our experts, Jacobs, who have been commissioned to produce the business case. The project, as we know, has the potential to transform Doncaster's economy, and the BCR of 9:1, if you look at the Deluxe categorisation, represents very high category, so that's excellent value for money, suggesting that for every £1 public sector generates £9 of benefits. Now that includes not just the airport, but it includes the wider benefits as well. So it's across the Gateway East. It's about the airport, and the FBC is based on the airport being a catalyst to generate wider jobs, wider GVA, etc. The costs are based on the financial plan, which, as Debbie outlined, has kind of been built up over throughout the project, really in terms of starting from the financial viability assessment, and then further informed through the procurement, and then incorporated based on and incorporated into the FBC. We are continuing to refine the estimates, and as it incorporates into the report, anything we can do to reduce the public sector investment will actually improve the BCR, etc. A BCR of projects are progressed on a BCR of 1:1, providing it delivers the outputs, provided it delivers the original scope. So a BCR of 9:1 is, as I said, very high. I think it will require considerable collaborative working to deliver. Whether we can say how certain we are it can be achieved, it's currently being assessed as part of the Simco process, so it's been submitted and we'll go through the external assurance process. I think the benefits, it needs everyone kind of working together to deliver them across, and which is where I think in terms of Christian and the working that we're doing in terms of what can be delivered, but a BCR of 1:1 is still in terms of a project, in terms of deliverable.
Okay, I've seen Steve. Are you all right with that, Councillor Khan? Do you want supplementary? Steve, you want to come in?
Thank you. How wide is the 9:1 ratio felt? Is it all over South Yorkshire, or is it just the Doncaster area? Is it just the site, or is it all over?
It's, as it says in the report, it's direct jobs as well as catalytic jobs. So that it's by inference, it's the ability to take for somebody who spends some money in the airport, as Phil was describing in the earlier meeting. Somebody who works in the airport gets some money in the pocket, spend it somewhere else, and on it goes. So it's both. It's three layers almost, that you've got direct, indirect and catalytic. So it's that circular economy we talked about. So it might actually be felt UK-wide, do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be just even the South Yorkshire. As part of this being, if you see this as part of a suite of regional airports, this could actually have an impact on Heathrow, as for example. Don't want to big us up, but, because there's so much congestion elsewhere in relation to, in particular, freight, this might provide a safety valve for bringing freight, the much-needed freight into the UK. That is how big this project could be, and that's in part why the BCR is so good.
If I may, quickly, Chair. I think we saw on Scrutiny things at airport that the freight during COVID went up 50%, it did take stuff coming from London, because a lot of the suppliers worked out it's easier to get into Doncaster and get all over because of where it's sited. Absolutely fantastic for freight. It works lovely. But I think I were alluding to the South Yorkshire. Obviously, UK is great. And yeah, I think we do realise how big this is. But when we talk in South Yorkshire that we'll be receiving some of this benefit, we just wonder what would happen and why the Oliver hasn't contributed as much as he potentially could have done, as they are going to benefit from it as well. That is and what happens if it doesn't? Obviously, we'll still go ahead, but they should be contributing.
I think we've got that question coming up actually from Councillor Hempshaw. So, yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I'll just move on to, I think your question, Councillor Smith, follows on a little bit from what we were just saying about the proposed benefits of the airport.
Yes, so thank you, Chair. My question is really, what's different from when the airport was operating previously?
Thanks, Councillor. I think that's a really good question, actually. I like that question a lot. You heard Debbie allude to, obviously, in terms of Heathrow, and to give you an idea, the third runway, I think the modelling of that is roughly about an annual freight volume of 1 million tonnes. Now, that's huge. And obviously, in terms of the time that takes to be able to deliver something like a third runway, and we've seen, obviously, the headlines of 800 houses and, obviously, closures potentially of the M25. That's huge. And now what we're saying is a regional airport and rebalancing, in terms of some of those opportunities for, obviously, in terms of northern airports, there's surely an argument around being able to significantly increase the freight volumes at DSA. In its prime in 2019, it was around 23,000 tonnes. This is an airport that should be, at that 100,000 tonnes plus. And so I think for us, in regards to our ambition on the freight volumes is key. We also talk about the fact that for an airport to be successful, it needs airlines. We've seen before previously in terms of some of the difficulties that Wizz Air had, previously operating at the airport, and ultimately it was down to one airline. Working with our advisors from Munich, we're very clear. We want to target a number of airlines, and have already been having those conversations for over 12 months with certain airlines. So I think, in terms of having a strategy where you've got an airport with only one airline doesn't work for us, for Doncaster. And hence why we want at least, a minimum of around about that kind of 4 to 5. And that's the kind of where we're working at. I think the other piece is very much around, in terms of the previous contracts. In regards to the aviation advisors that have been advising us throughout this process and the critique of how things were done in the past, very much a tight fiscal control of regional airports is key. And so I think we want a tighter fiscal control of, obviously, in terms of the finances in regards to the airport. I suppose the other piece is very much around carbon reduction. And so I think there's lots in the press at the moment around climate and net zero airports. But actually, we've got an airport that's, probably at this moment in time, it's not that very much in terms from a greening point of view. Now, that offers, in terms of opportunities around energy capture. So I think there's something for me around the airport and how do we, in terms of help to meet that kind of 2050 net zero ambition as well. And I think the other piece, not so much from a financial point of view, but it's that education piece. And very much how do we hard bake the education piece around all the institutions, so whether it's primary school or secondary school or university technical college or even the universities in our region or outside, how do we hard bake the kind of education element into the kind of the South Yorkshire Airport City programme? And that's the conversations we've been having privately behind, in terms of the closed doors with those education providers. So I think on a number of fronts, hopefully it will feel, in terms of very different. I suppose, and just the last point is, and it alludes to the response that Faye was mentioning around the investment zone and the 9 to 1. So we were very clear in our negotiations with Peel that we wanted the ability to grow the airport, and specifically what we refer to as DSA 04, which is about 126 acres, the ability to develop airside aviation, like-minded industries, whether or not it's from a manufacturing or it's from additional hangars, will be key. That will bring significant revenue into the airport, but also into Doncaster. So hopefully we've got a model which excites, and obviously, clearly, this is an airport that's the heart of the UK. Listed. Oh yeah. Sorry. The other just final comment is currently we're working with Turley's. So Turley's in co-production with ourselves and Peel produced a wider master plan for the whole locality. So not only for the airport, but also for Gateway East. That was signed off by Peel and Turley's last month. It's on the public domain now. We've asked Turley's to do a more of an in-depth, detailed piece, specifically around the airport and all those opportunities that have presented themselves, as well as the SAL4. So we hope to kind of get that finalised by the end of this month. But hopefully that kind of master plan will show, in terms of the general public and businesses, some of those really exciting opportunities that have presented themselves to us. Well, thank you.
Can I just sort of summarise a little bit from what you were saying there? Is the difference the will to do this?
I think partly, yeah. We've got a really exciting team here. In terms of looking at, not only in terms of City of Doncaster Council colleagues, now obviously in terms of Fly Doncaster colleagues, but also in regards to our advisors. Munich, as well as our aviation advisors, I've been so impressed with, the Munich leadership team that have come over. They've got a successful airport which is running around 40 million passengers and around 400,000 tonnes of freight. They've got bold ambitions, and we want to capture some of that and have it here in Doncaster. So, yeah.
Thank you. Another question from Councillor Cox.
It's me again. Why was it not possible to gain more private investment?
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I think, as Debbie explained in terms of the procurement process, we spent significant efforts during the summer months as part of that kind of, that further due diligence to see whether we could get private sector funding. Several months, several different, we must have had a list of 10, 11, 12, a list of, avenues that were being explored and, continuing to kind of have a look at, progressing, what's the update on this? Is there anything further we can provide on this? There was significant amount of time and effort that kind of went into that, seeking external private investment. And unfortunately, where we were at that point in time, due to the complexity of the proposal, the risk in terms of, it's currently closed, opening. We've got the financial viability assessment as well that has identified that some public sector investment is needed to get, because it is closed, etc. I also think there's an element of the risk appetite of the market as well, in terms of ability to provide that private investment. And we kind of, having explored, spent significant, amounts of time in terms of exploring those options. We got to the place where it was kind of like, we'd kind of, if we spent more time on it, we were going to have the risk in terms of the airspace, and it's trying to balance that really in terms of taking things forward. So at that point, we felt we'd explored it as much as we possibly could at that point in time, and we had to then kind of shift into the, right, so it's not looking like we're going to be able to get anything, or if we could get something, the rates would be, significant, and then that impacts on the sustainability and in some ways impacts on, the CDC as well in terms of providing, that kind of level of subsidy, etc. So we got to the point where we kind of looked at, right, well, could we do it through public sector investment, public sector subsidy? We then had, the discussion with our advisors in terms of, because we knew that would need a subsidy assessment. And I think you will have seen the subsidy report, which is actually positive. It has some areas for improvement, which we were, that we will now consider, and we'll, look at our supplementary information. But generally, we had, significant amount of support and, advice really in terms of that subsidy as well. So that's where we kind of got to really in terms of that. I think also it's the complexity of the proposal in relation to the lease as well, and in terms of why we are where we are.
Debbie, do you just want to come in, then I'll bring...
Just want to embellish a little point that Faye said in there. We could have got private finance. It would have cost us more. It would have cost us more, and that's why, in terms of, from a value for money point of view, the rates that the local authority can secure were less than what the commercial banks would offer. So we could have gone down that route. It's just it wouldn't have represented value for money. So that's another. So of the different areas that we went into as looking for private finance, there were routes, but they just weren't suitable given the alternatives we had from a value for money point of view.
Councillor Jones, you want a question?
Sorry about that. The finance. And what we got to, latterly is this, we'll get support from Simca. And I just wondered why, in the first place, we didn't take on board the fact that some of the money now comes from Simca via the excess investments from all the South Yorkshire authorities, and we didn't look at offering the share values from each of those authorities to actually come on board, which would have been additional to money to that process, plus the fact that they would have accepted, to my mind, that the interest that they'd accrued over this period of time would have been also available. Just a point that creating a single entity as a company doesn't, you know, putting all the eggs in one basket doesn't seem right to me. It's a question that you may answer later, I don't know. I just feel as though that would have been ventured, and I've not had it ever mentioned at all. All I've heard is that other people are not interested. So take that point on board, please. I think, I must say at this point in time, I've been involved in this process with Christian and obviously from aspects of the officers. I have confidence in what I'm being faced with, but latterly I wasn't told that we were forming a company. While the mayor's here, I'm just saying this. Take people with you. Take people with you. Don't put obstacles that we're not quite sure of in front of us, and so we can understand it. And that's why we sat it. That's why we actually called an extraordinary meeting, which is obviously not part of the process. We wanted all councillors to be aware of the issues that we face with. But in real terms, it's those small things that get probably forgotten and not related to give us the confidence, not us, but councillors the confidence, because they're going to make the final decision.
Thank you for that. I mean, we've got a question that talks about risks, so obviously we'll take that into consideration. Councillor Khan, you've got a question about the timescale?
Yeah, just a quick one about why the timescales have been so tight and why we've had to move in the way we have.
Thank you. As I alluded in my opening remarks, if you look at the timetable we've been going at this, I think the first, I look when because it's always good to look back. Our first report to full council was on the 17th of November 22, and we've taken 7 reports since that point. So it might feel that it's tight, but it has been going on for some time. And in particular, I just, as part of my little sort of preparation for this, I looked back at the Rule 16 report that was signed on the 20th of March last year. And at that point in time, what it did is it communicated to decision makers that we were entering into a fundamental lease, and they also set out the funding arrangements in order to authorise those. The reason why I pulled that out is because at that point it also, in paragraph 16, outlined that within the lease arrangements included break clauses. Now those break clauses were mutually agreed, but set a framework, a time period of 7 years in order to give us sufficient time in order to get the airport reopened and operational and start the development. As such, that takes us up to the 20th of March 31. So in part, time has been on our mind all this time, because whatever we've been doing, we've worked as quick as we possibly can, because the time it takes to do the preparation, you heard all that procurement process that we went through, that has taken time away from actually reopening and mobilising the airport. We need as much time to do that in order to achieve passengers, freight activity and the development activity that Christian referenced as part of the wider Gateway East development. So we can't dawdle. We've had to keep going at pace, and this has meant that things have got so in when Faye was describing what happened in relation to the finances, we went down those different opportunities as much as we could, but then we had to make a clinical decision. We could have found something, but we'd have lost time, and we had to balance up that time versus the benefit, when at the same time we have run multiple tracks of activity. So as Faye's described, we developed the outline business case, which then became the full business case. And it was clear in that there would need to be a public subsidy. It was also clear that, there were massive opportunities as a result of the investment. So that's the balance we've been, our environment we've been looking at all along. So hopefully that it does feel like each stage has been really tight. Living in the project, everything we've done, we've had to execute really tight times to matters, because each part of those procurement exercises, our advisors were saying, this could take you years, and we've gone like, no, we ain't got years, we've got to get on with this. So we've largely, all the way through these different stages, we've been conscious of that time, in part because of the environment we've been operating in.
Thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Cox.
Thank you. I didn't get a response to me passenger flights for 26 as you're talking about time. I mean, something that we've asked for, and same as Alan's just said, we have constantly asked for comms to put out to public to keep everybody with the story that's going forward. Haven't we, Christian? We have. And we have received, up to press, nothing. And same as we've all said, we want to take people with us. That's why this was an opportunity for all councillors to come in and ask questions. So all that we ever see is the mayor there telling residents what's going to happen. There's no consultation to a massive spend of 130 odd million that now says it's 200 and something million. Don't know how right that is. So all we're hearing as elected members is what Ross is putting out and somebody else on social media. But that's all we're getting. So, I mean, this was an opportunity for people to ask questions. Unfortunately, not many have turned up. But are we absolutely guaranteeing residents that there will be a flight, passenger people, going in summer 26?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I alluded to it in my previous answer, Councillor. But clearly we are, in terms of pushing for commercial activity for this airport to be licensed for 24 hours to enable commercial flights. However, the decision on that, it doesn't lay with, in terms of us as a council, it lays with the Civil Aviation Authority, and hence, the importance of this Friday's meeting. So in answer, that's what we're pushing for, Councillor. But obviously it's not within our gift. And we hope, in terms of the Civil Aviation Authority, make the right decision for Doncaster.
So, Steve, you just wanted to ask about the risk, which we touched on, your next question, didn't you?
I'm sorry, Chair, but I could go on and on, and I think as Christians aware, we have, and I thank you all for work that you're doing. And we're not trying to pull what you're doing apart. What we're trying to do is saying, look, these are questions that residents are asking us, and we haven't had an opportunity to ask these questions. I know we've met, Christian, and we've met lots of times, and I thank you very much. But there are people out there assuming things that haven't had the chance to ask the questions. We've got lists of questions. I mean...
Talking of questions, would you like to ask it,
I would,
Steve?
I would. I'm sorry, Chair. Hang on, let me...
1 to 6.
How have the risks been mitigated? Go on, Alan. How have the risks been mitigated?
And what are the risks? Yeah.
Hi, I'll make a start really talking in terms of the financial risks. We've detailed in the report the top 5 risks in relation to the programme, and the one that's kind of prominent in my mind is the financial exposure, obviously, is the section 151. And what we have kind of discussed is lots of mitigations in terms of, because I've got to wear kind of probably 2 hats really in terms of this one, because I've got to protect CDC, but also want to try and support the reopening. So the main one from my perspective is the financial exposure, the financial sustainability risk. So and there's multiple risks within that. So like if you talk about overall financial sustainability, we've talked about the financial viability assessment, we've talked about the financial plan. We could probably go through each line of that financial plan, and there'll be various risks in relation to each line. So some will have a bigger impact than others. So one of the mitigations initially is that we've done that piece of work initially. We've worked closely with aviation advisors, with EY and colleagues to prepare that initial financial plan, taking into account all those assumptions and those risks. So within that, we talk about the capital investment needed. We've kind of put estimates in for that. And we've kind of, some of the mitigations are that's built based on the asset condition surveys, that we've obtained. So I kind of talk about, but all the way through the programme, we're constantly considering risks and looking at what mitigations we can incorporate, getting advice where possible and where we can. For example, Debbie talked about earlier about the KC advice and about our legal advisors as well in terms of the structure of the organisation, and also with the with the values involved, how we can, the 100% control is about GRIP, is about ensuring that there is robust governance. So just within our kind of discussions, being really clear in terms of those roles. So in terms of the directors, currently Debbie, Damien and Christian are directors, so that means that myself and Scott in some ways have to kind of be the CDC overseeing, where to ensure that we've kind of got that clear governance clear. So there's lots and lots of mitigations that have already been taking place. There's future mitigations as well that we kind of we need to ensure. Debbie talked about a loan agreement, for example, which would be in place, so that we've kind of started to have a look at what that would incorporate. But all these things are kind of looking at the risks and looking at from the perspective of how can we mitigate that as much as we can. And then obviously the airspace is another significant risk.
Christian, I'm finished. They aren't finished.
Go on then, Christian.
Thanks, Councillor. He was just, look, we've got a full risk register, as Eddie, in terms of detailed programme you'd expect. But it was just on the airspace. We know, look, there's a strategic risk. The airspace, not being able to obtain the airspace, will have a detrimental impact on, being able to operate flights. And clearly we're pushing extremely hard to ensure that we get the right decision from the CEA. The negative from a risk and an impact point of view would be, as you can imagine, an airline, the likes of, for instance, a TUI or an EasyJet, would require at least 12 months notice. And obviously, what we don't want to do is have these, airlines get entrenched into other airports to be the detriment of obviously moving into Doncaster. So the importance of the airspace cannot be, in terms of stated.
Alan, can I ask, is your question relating to risk? Yeah.
I mean, as I said before, my comments, and you can go back 6 months and ask you the same question about airspace and the importance of it and making sure that was guaranteed. I do ask a question. You had a recent visit by central government. Was the implied requirements on the airspace put to central government and the urgency and the need for that to be the foremost on the list? That's one question. The other one is that I have a problem with the actual limited company and Doncaster, where the officers seem to be financial officers of the same. And therefore, I'm not sure, and I've not seen a memorandum of understanding, and I know that's coming, presumably, that within that, it defines those people responsible. And that's one of the issues I've got, is who is responsible for those risks and the financial aspects. Because presumably, from my point of view, as I see it now, is that the council will give you the loan. And therefore, it's not that person that sat there as a council officer, it's the person who's the director of that company. I wanted to understand the legal implications of how that works.
Do you just want to switch your mic off? Thank you.
I'll take the second part of that question and then pass Christian. The other part, there'll be a separation of duties between the company and its directors and the council's responsibility. I think Faye's already alluded to that in one of her earlier responses. So effectively, decisions that are made within the council about its relationship ongoing with Fly Doncaster, once we get to that point, and that's still some way down the line, won't involve those people who are directors of Fly Doncaster. And as you probably know, companies change over time anyway. So effectively, I know we've had this conversation outside of here before. At the moment, Fly Doncaster exists on a piece of paper. That's all it is. It doesn't have a bank account, it doesn't have any money, doesn't have any powers, doesn't have any leases or anything. All of that would be things to come, including the finalisation of the memorandum and articles of association about that company, its internal governance. I don't know, you're on a company, you're on something like your home, so you understand some of how this works. All of that is yet to be finalised at the point prior to when it would take over the lease of the airport and it would start operations. So the people who are directors now may not always be the directors. They may change over time. The three officers who are the directors at the moment, it's right that they're the directors now, but actually as it becomes more of an operational airport, it may well be that other people with different skill sets are brought in and their role changes. But effectively, in law, the directors of a company's first responsibility is to the company, so therefore they won't be taking part in decision making about giving further money to the council to the company going forward. That's very much set out. And when we've talked about how we would run delegations of further decision making, it's always been Faye and I as Section 151 officer and monitoring officer rather than Debbie in her role that we would represent the council, because clearly the directors, one of which is Debbie, would need to reflect on their role as Fly Doncaster rather than their role at Doncaster Council. So those things are being thought of, and those protections will be put in place going forward at the right time. But we're not there at the moment, frankly. That's some way down the line, and there'll be lots and lots of...
And what you've explained goes some way to doing that, so that I know that I've got confidence in what you're doing. Otherwise, I haven't. I'm grasping in thin air. Myself, I might be a lot of people, members of this council, who actually can understand a great deal more than me. But the other question, or add to that, is there any possibility that I know as a board member of St Leger that some of the aspects of St Leger are underwritten by the council?
I think St Leger's a slightly different issue, isn't it? Because it has sort of one client, which is the council, and it effectively operates as a company version of what would have, in the old days, been the housing department. So it's slightly different. But yeah, I mean, Fly Doncaster would get its money initially through the loan and then through trading activity. So its money will only really come from those two sources, at least initially. But again, I think as you...
I would like to move...
Is to understand...
Yeah.
Is the implications to that is that, yes, we will be underwriting it to a certain extent. I didn't say it's like St Leger, you don't underwrite it all.
Hang on, Debbie.
I'm just going to bring Debbie in, and then I am going to move on so that somebody else can have an opportunity to ask questions. Debbie, yeah.
I think you've given us a sense of the concerns you have. And what Scott said, and just to emphasise, at the point we need to take those decisions, that will be subject to another report. So we'll see you at another meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I've got Councillor Hempshaw to ask a question.
Thank you. So it's great to hear you describe the airport as the beating heart of the UK and possibly the North. And I'd like to thank you all for your hard work and enthusiasm up to now, and there's a lot more to do. But what I'm hearing is that you're saying that Doncaster could be the third runway for Heathrow. It's the third runway in waiting, you know, and it sounds like it'd be a lot simpler than what they need to do to create their third runway. So I'm just putting it out there. So I've got two questions, and if Chair will allow this, can I join them together? Because I think
Yeah, you can.
So firstly, what are we going to name the airport? Is it going to be renamed, or is that still up for discussion?
In all honesty, Councillor, I think it's one for the future. To be honest, I think our sole focus at the moment is getting this airport operational. I think, you know, from a renaming point of view, just in terms of the rebranding, could be extremely costly. And we need to, you know, there's implications of that. But actually, in terms of our focus, is very much around, you know, getting this airport operational. So I think it's probably one to decide in due course.
Thank you, because I think people in Doncaster want ownership of the airport, and we've had Doncaster Sheffield, and now it's South Yorkshire Airport. And I personally would like to see it go out there to maybe ask what people want to call it, like we did with the council when we became a city. And that's why I'm leading to the other question, and that is why is CDC, obviously Doncaster Council, providing the gain share money if the project is to benefit the whole of South Yorkshire and the mayoral combined authority? You know, if we're paying for it, can we name it? Can we have it as our own?
No, in terms of the gain share, and I guess in terms of the naming, Christian's just said to us, we just need to, our sole focus needs to be on doing the here and now and mobilisation. In terms of the gain share, as I referenced earlier, the council took the decision to enter into the lease negotiations, and in advance of the full business case being complete, we also signed the lease, as referenced earlier, in March last year. What we knew is that the gain share resources had been allocated to... so Faye sort of talked about the finance and the challenges we had there, and the gain share money had been allocated to each constituent authority. So we get 22.1% intake of the gain share funding, and that's why we knew at the point when we were having the discussions about the funding that we had a plan B, and that's partly the funding will come. Funding will come to us, And yeah, that'll help in terms of supporting the reopening of the airport.
Sorry. With gain share, that gain share is obviously there for all of Doncaster, isn't it? I mean, that was part of requesting this meeting, that other councillors could see what impact potentially it could have on other parts of Doncaster in every ward. But I think we keep going back to the Simca commitment, if you like. There doesn't seem to be much of a commitment. What would happen if Oliver come the summer decides, yeah, it's too much of a financial risk, I don't want to play that game, or it's not achieving the zero targets I'd like to achieve? You know, because there's lots of cop-outs for him, isn't there? There's lots of ways out that he could take. What would happen if that came? Would it be a case that, yeah, it works freight, but again, that decides on airspace? But what would happen? Because it's scary, really.
Probably what I would say is, going back to a bit of Faye's point around the business case, the business case opportunities speak for themselves. There's such a compelling case that we're fairly confident, as we have been all along, that whatever's put in front of us, we'll be able to demonstrate there's a good business case and a rationale for the resources needed. And that's in part why I'm saying that the monies have been allocated, and the mayor's made it clear this is a top priority. So it does, as you rightly indicate, have an impact on there's not the resource. We can't spend money twice, so that money won't be spent somewhere else in the city. But again, coming back to all the jobs, the indirect jobs, the catalytic, and the benefits in totality, they're going to permeate right across the whole city. So that's in part why seeing that bigger picture about utilising that resource, just it's such a compelling argument about why the investment's needed for the airport, because of the discernible benefits that arise for everybody.
Yeah, and then I'll bring Glynis in after
Thank
that.
you, Chair.
Leanne, if she, excuse me,
one of the things
just a second. And Leanne, if she wants to follow up anyway on that question. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, Leanne.
I'm okay, thank you.
Right, Alan, if you want to ask a question, then I'll bring Glynis in.
Just from my recollection, gain share was a yearly advance. So you've got that advance that's coming this year. It repeats it for how many years? Just 26 years. And I think this is a point that you've got to get over to councillors. They're not being involved in South Yorkshire, and it's in the way it works as such. So it's not money you're only going to get the once. It's over that period of time that you can look at using that. So after we've used that, we might say, or the mayor might say, I mean, I suppose it comes down to councillors, because it's got to come to council for agreement, is that the mayor say, I think we ought to go a little bit further. We can support it a little bit further if it's not shown that it's the investments created what we thought initially, but eventually it will do. And I'm same as you. You're looking at why we're building Heathrow. That's why it's the question mark central government. You know, you should be out there jumping up and down saying this is what we've got to do. But be aware, it's not just that one pot of money once. It's every year. And that's one clear thing that you ought to make sure that other councillors know.
Mayor Jones, you want to come in?
I'm not here to fight the battles for Heathrow. I'm here to seek to push Doncaster and stimulate the economy of Doncaster. It has to come via the South Yorkshire MCA. We're talking about a name, so it's called South Yorkshire City. That's wider than the airport. It's all the different landing behind it and going forward. But this government has actually said they are here to support us and get the airport open, which I'm delighted to hear. And I have asked, we would like to see you working alongside us so that we can draw down monies as appropriate. You same voice as me. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring Glynis in. I think to some extent this is actually the most important question.
Thank you, Chair. So regarding one of the major projects outlined in the corporate plan, what is being done to ensure that those jobs created as a result of the airport are made accessible in order to create a more diverse workforce within Doncaster?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I think you can see some of the strength of Doncaster Sheffield Airport. You only have to walk around the terminal, and you could see previously the likes of whether or not it was the FODSA group who were supporting individuals who have got disabilities. The real strength of some of the assets there. We've been clear about in terms of making sure that this is a very in terms of very friendly. The People's Airport is a term that obviously Ross Mayor Jones alludes to. So we've started behind the scenes in regards from a recruitment point of view, looking at on the back of what we did with the iPort Academy, of something which is referred to as Gateway East Academy. And so what we're keen to do is to work, with the general public as well as supporting the businesses going forward. But actually, how do we positively, impact in those schools from such an early age to how do we also, in terms of look at the future business needs of, in terms of the supply chain of staff for some of those key businesses that are looking to locate around the airport. So from a CDC point of view, it's not something that we can do in isolation, and hence why we're talking to a number of both private sector providers, recruitment providers, as well as obviously public institutions, the colleges, the schools, just to make sure that we get it right before we obviously start to populate a structure which will have a significant number of employees in. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I've just honestly, any questions that we have come to the end of the sort of predetermined questions. Anybody got anything they want to ask that's not been covered?
Yeah, I would like to ask you, Chair, if you look at the recommendations, to add that they recommended that the Mayor and Cabinet and OSMC enable the Council members to aware of the financial implications and responsibilities of using their monies for the programme, which is a list of 1 to 8. I've got 7 here on written. I've put another one and that is the results. Report back to Scrutiny the results of the CAA inclusion, and not keep it under a bushel or anything like that. I think those reports ought to be more frequent as we go through the process. And I know it takes your time, but be open and accountable to the members of this council.
Well, I think to some extent you're just touching on my final question, which is what is the role of scrutiny going forward? I mean, I could see it as a sort of clear, the full business case in summer, maybe, that we ought to be looking at that. We could certainly bring...
In terms of future decisions, as I sort of slightly joked earlier, there'll be other things that need to come forward in terms of decision making. So Scott referenced about the structure, the governance around Fly Doncaster. So you'll need to have that. So that will be a matter that needs to be considered by the council. There will also be, as Faye described, the loan agreement between the council and the company. So that's another decision. There's also the sublease. So at the moment, the superior lease is held by the council. But in order to get in order for the company, to protect the council as well as the company to be operational, that sublease will need to be transacted between the council and Fly Doncaster. So there's a number of things, key activities that will be occurring hopefully soon, that will be coming back, and as you referenced, the engagement. Although we've got a significant meeting on Friday with the CA, that won't be an outcome that we can report on. I think that will just be part of the ongoing dialogue, because there'll be further forms that we need to complete and submit. So there'll be a lot of stages that we still need to go through.
Chair, accepting that, and I think I understand that, that it doesn't happen, yet straight away, but keep people informed. We've been informed throughout, and we've never used that information for any benefit, apart from the fact that when people ask me, I keep saying, well, it's an international company. That's as far as I've gone. And so, we're capable of assimilating information and keeping it confidential.
Can I just go through the recommendations? And I think what we're talking about is a further report coming to scrutiny, probably around summer. It's my sort of, maybe before. Thank you. So what we're actually looking at, as and when appropriate. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Sorry, I'm So we've got comments, feedback. So I'm just looking at the recommendations. It's a bit late for me now. This has been a long meeting. So we've got comments and feedback and recommendations, which we've. Can I just anybody is proposed that I'm okay the letter as chair? Yeah. So obviously we've got copious notes on what people have talked about, and a further report to come back as appropriate. Right, so paragraph 3 from recommendations that the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee consider the Cabinet report, South Yorkshire Airport City approvals required to support the reopening of the airport as attached, and provide any comment, feedback or recommendations that may assist or inform any future decision making. So we're okay with that recommendation?
No, I've added that the OMC should receive those reports.
Yeah, we'll put that back. We'll put that in, yeah. Okay, so is that okay, Caroline? I've done everything I need to do. Thank you. And everybody's we're doing it with the proposer and seconder that I'll agree a letter to Cabinet. Is that proposed?
Yeah.
Seconded. Thank you. Okay, we've completed that bit of the agenda. We have got the forward plan and overview and scrutiny work plan, but maybe we can consider that next time we meet. I don't know. It's not going to... Okay, right. Thank you very much for your attendance, everybody. Thank you.